Hello there. Welcome to the Bangkok Bareback. Today I'm going to be talking about another person. Again, this is my cultural literacy series, the Bangkok Bareback. You guys all know this. You people all know this. So, I'm going to be talking about Anthony Trail. Who is Anthony Trail? Anthony Trail was a famous linguist in South Africa. I can't seem to find any pictures of the guy for some reason. There might be pictures of him. I think he was a white South African guy, basically. But anyway, he would go and he would study the click languages. Click languages, where they would click instead of make regular sounds. Some of the languages would have up to 120 different sounds in them, which is absolutely absurd. And Anthony Trail would go out to South Africa, go hiking, and talk to the different tribes. In order to learn the languages, he also had to learn the culture and how the tribes functioned and stuff like that. The tribes were pretty egalitarian, that women and the men both made decisions for the whole tribe. And they generally hunted together. They were not as segregated as some other tribes where they segregate women and men. Well, he noticed that right away. Leisure is also a very important thing in their society. With these tribes, they enjoy resting, they enjoy fun and games, but they didn't wear as much clothes because it's hot, and these tribes didn't need to wear as much clothes because their skin's already pretty tough from the environment. They just somehow lived like that. So he noticed that he dressed like them. He did his customs with them. He learned their language, and he was very honored to learn their language. For 14 years he was studying them. And what's interesting is he developed something on his throat. When he was starting to do the click sounds on by the way, the language is called XOL or Ko, the Ko language. He started to develop a lump on his larynx. Kids normally don't have that lump until they're in their teenage years. He started to get it too, because he started to master a language so much where his body was physically changing because of it. And so Anthony Trail is a legend among men. Any man who goes out of their way to learn a language that not only mentally you have to process all the sounds, but then physically it changes you, is a true man, in my opinion. He went out of his way, his comfort zone, to talk to people. He doesn't speak English. Anthony Trail was a native English speaker. He spoke other languages too in South Africa. I almost guarantee you he probably spoke Afrikaans and some other languages. The fact that he went out of his way to speak a fourth or fifth language, to speak to these people, and become one of the greatest linguistic professors in South Africa it's incredible to me. I know we just made another video about a guy from South Africa, John Edmund. That was a few videos back. But I wanted to talk about this guy because he's such an inspiration to me. A guy who's willing to study an endangered language just so he can write down everything he knows about it and teach it to the world, and how these click consonants actually work. It's incredible. A language that has 3 times more sounds than English. It's incredible to me. And Anthony Trail should be remembered because of that. It's so sad to me that people don't know these people, that his name. He should be a household legend among men. But he isn't, because nobody cares. We care more about the greatest rappers or whatever in our society than Anthony Trail. And in my opinion, in order to be culturally literate, you have to know a little about everything. And Anthony Trail is at least something to know about. Rappers that commit crimes, they might be cool or whatnot. I don't know why people like to listen to their music. I go to work and I'm listening to this rap music. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if they were rapping about Anthony Trail? I don't think they would listen to it, but I just think it would be a little bit more interesting. You would learn something from it. But no, instead we're learning about the same crimes, same drugs, same money. I guess the drugs are a little different. I don't know. I'm getting tired of listening to rap music, so that's why I made a cultural literacy series in the first place. And Anthony Trail is a perfect example of what we're missing in society. Is people go out of their way to do things that are necessarily hard. They don't do things because they're easy. They do it because it's really, really difficult at the beginning. But once they achieve their goal, they have all that time to look back on it and say, oh, I actually achieved something here. I actually made a manuscript for this language so people can actually learn it. And that is fascinating to me. That is really fascinating. And so, I don't know that much. But, you know, I'm sure there's another guy I listen to. Let's see, I learned Anthony Trail from him. Was Sean Get Off My Lawn. He's, I believe, a Latvian YouTuber. He lives in Latvia, and he studies different languages across the world. And he speaks Manx, and he speaks, obviously, Latvian and Russian and Hebrew and English. Those are his, 5 main languages. I'm surprised he speaks freaking Manx, to be honest with you. Nobody speaks Manx in Latvia, but whatever. The guy is a freaking genius in terms of languages, in my opinion, because I don't speak anything but English. But I find it so incredible just to hear his accent. He does have an accent when he speaks English, in my opinion. He doesn't sound like a native when he speaks English, but you could tell he understands everything that's going on around him. You can easily tell he understands English perfectly fine. The way he speaks is it's a strong either Latvian or, I don't know what accent it is really, because it doesn't sound Latvian to me. It sounds more like an Israeli accent, but I don't know if he's from Israel, but I think he speaks Hebrew, so I could be entirely wrong. And apparently he knows a little bit of Arabic too. Arabic and Hebrew are semi-related, so I guess that kind of makes sense. But they're so distantly related that I don't know. But yeah, it's just sort of interesting. That's where I got mostly, I get interested by these languages that I don't really know. And it's kind of interesting. Another thing is, I guess I should have mentioned in a different video, but Papua New Guinea has 840 languages. By the way, none of them are click languages, sadly enough. In fact, there's only been one click language found outside of Africa. That's sadly dead today. Nobody speaks it anymore. But it was found in Australia. It was a liturgical language, meaning it was a religious language. So the tribe would speak their own native language, and then the click language would be what they would communicate. And they wouldn't write it down, but they would pass it down their generations, and it would be an honorable thing to speak it. Sadly, however, the religion has died, and Christianity has took over the tribe. They still speak their native language, but their click language is gone. And it was the only other language that had click sounds outside of Africa. And there's very little evidence saying that click language relates to the African languages, which, yeah, I don't think they were. I think it was even on the other side of Australia, so even if it was related to the African click languages. And by the way, there's five different language families that have click sounds. There's technically 6 if you're talking about the Bantu languages, but they borrowed it from the 5 other families of click sounds. Also, 2 of the click languages are found in Tanzania, which I find is fascinating to me. That Tanzania has 2 click language families that are language isolates. Nobody knows. Those tribes don't really have any other related, they can't even find common words between the 2 languages. Yet they both have click sounds, and yet they're in Tanzania and they're nowhere near South Africa and Namibia. That's fascinating to me. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, click languages can be found pretty much throughout all of South Africa somewhat. I mean, they were not found in Afrikaans and English, but they're found pretty much even the Zulu can speak a little bit of clicks. So it goes all the way to Namibia, to South Africa, and then there's 2 random languages found in the middle of Tanzania that are not bordering each other. There's other languages around it that don't have click sounds in. I find that incredibly fascinating. And nobody seems to find it. They don't seem to know how they're related in any way. They did originally put them in the click language, the Khoisan language family, which, by the way, is outdated now. They don't use that term anymore. And it can be considered offensive for some people. Or just seem too inclusive, actually, would be the correct word, I guess. I mean, yeah, but Anthony Trail and the click languages, you really can't go wrong with learning about just his story. And the fact that he grew up in South Africa and he wanted to learn about a tribe of people that spoke more sounds than anybody else in the world. There's one sound that's not found in their language. It's actually the Danish speak it. They have this random vowel sound that nobody can pronounce. Not even the freaking Swedes and Norwegians know how to pronounce it. They can understand it, but they don't pronounce it very well. And the Danish have this one random sound, a vowel sound that I thought was interesting that I couldn't even describe to you. You have to look it up. But it was fascinating when I found it. I'm like, what the heck? I did not realize the Danish have their own vowel sound that no other language has in the world. Not even the click languages have it. So, I mean, there's obviously, the languages are so diverse that we're never going to be able to find a language that has all the sounds in the world. I mean, if you do, that would be incredibly fascinating. But even Khoi has to use the same sounds for different words. So I can't imagine that you could put a different... I mean, theoretically, I guess you could, but I don't know. This would be incredibly difficult. And it would have to be like a polysynthetic language if you were to do that. And anybody that knows languages, right? Most tribal languages are mostly polysynthetic. Most big languages like English or Chinese is analytic. Spanish is in the middle. Spanish would be considered I think a agglutinative language. Yeah, probably agglutinative. And then like Indo-European, the start of the English language was probably, Pro-Indo-European was probably a synthetic. So it goes, or maybe it was agglutinative. No, it goes analytical, then fusional, then agglutinative, then polysynthetic or synthetic. And so, like, I guess Pro-Indo-European would be considered either synthetic or would be considered agglutinative. And then I know Latin started as an agglutinative language, and then towards the end, late Latin and the Latin spoken today would be considered fusional, I guess. And Spanish would be even more fusional. It would be more analytical. So you got a scale, basically. Analytical, which is where the English language is, and Chinese. Then you got Spanish. Then you got Latin, Middle Latin, and then you got Indo-European's also in there, and then you got the Finnish language, or I think even Khoi would probably fit under that polysynthetic or synthetic, because polysynthetic is like the most synthetic. It's like really compounded words. Like the words are super long, a word can be considered a sentence, which is fascinating, but languages are structured, like it's literally the way they think structurally very different. I think Basque would be considered agglutinative. So Basque is actually more agglutinative than Latin. Basque, by the way, if people don't know, is a language isolate in Europe, which I'm sure you guys knew that. If you didn't, now you know that Basque is a very, very rare language spoken in Spain and a little bit of France, not that much in France. Most of the speakers are in Spain, about 92%, I think, are in Spain. And it's incredibly difficult for me to even comprehend how ergativity works in a language, or even how, like, the cases are so weird. And it's a language isolate, meaning it's before any of the other languages in Europe. I mean, when the English invaded, the Germans invaded, the Basques were already there, most likely. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any link to any other language in the world. They were probably, we have very little of their writings in their original language. I don't think they wrote down much, and I don't even think there was really a Basque state. Navarre was the only Basque state I can think of before Spain took it over. And Basque is still spoken by 600,000 people, which, granted, it's not a lot of people, but it's not a little amount of people. It can definitely last a while, at least for a while. And I'm kind of sad that it didn't spread to the Americas. I heard that a lot of Basque people moved to Americas. For instance, Bolivar is literally a Spanish name. So when you ever hear Bolivia or the Bolivar Republic of Venezuela, whenever you hear that Bolivar, that's actually a Basque name. Bolivar was the guy who got independence for most of South America, or he convinced South America to gain independence from Spain. And Bolivar itself is a Basque name. And so there's one country with Basque origin called Bolivia. And I think that's fascinating to me, that a country that doesn't speak Basque has a Basque origin. A language isolate, by the way, which is all the way spoken in Europe and not even in the Americas. But that's because Bolivar lived in the Americas and he never lived in Europe. But his ancestors probably came from the Basque country, which is probably why he had a Basque name. But it's such an interesting, fascinating concept, or, whatever. And so there, legends like Bolivar or legends like Anthony Trail, you can learn a lot from them. I know Bolivar was probably only Spanish speaking. He probably did speak other languages too. I don't know. But a lot of people like that, we really need to learn more about their history. Bolivar was basically a George Washington of South America. That's arguable, but I would say, yeah, he was pretty controversial. But I mean, when Venezuela and Bolivia get their names from him, he seemed to be pretty influential in South American history. But yeah, you can learn a lot from just learning a lot from different countries and different languages and different cultures, different people around the world. I love to learn about different cultures. It can be incredibly humbling to know that people before you had much harder lives than we do today. And today you could hypothetically put 25% of your income in index funds or retire in 20 years. You put 25% of your income into index funds, but you gotta have a high income to do it. It's kind of, for me, I'm living with my parents and I still can barely do it. I can't imagine somebody going through and doing it by themselves without living with parents with the same income I make. Now, if I was making plumber income, maybe I could actually, but yeah, I have it much easier than most people, and I still struggle to make that 25% a year contributions to my retirement accounts. So, not guaranteed to happen. But at the same time, I love learning about different things like that. And maybe in the next episode of the Bangkok Bareback, I'll actually talk about a stupid country for once. I might even talk about Malaysia because I know a lot about their politics, or UAE. I don't know. I want to talk about other people's politics. This is just to talk about, although they are very conservative countries, I would love to learn more about them. Or I would just talk about them, which would be very interesting. Because I feel like Malaysia and UAE do very similar stuff. So maybe that's what I'll do with the next episode. But yeah, languages are fascinating and have many different sounds in them. Obviously, the first episode, you go all the way back to the first episode of the Bangkok Bareback. We talk about do support and how English is the only language with do support. For the most part, there doesn't seem to be any records of any other language having it, which is fascinating, which makes English a very cultural outlier to any other language in the world. And it makes our language very unique in that sense, or at least to us English speakers it does. And people who speak as a second language might find it a weird quirk. They probably don't even think about it that much, but because there's so many English speakers that speak as a second language, they probably don't care. But it is fascinating. Anyway, goodbye. Goodbye. The Bangkok Bareback.